Unfortunately, I don't think Saida Engstrom can join us today, so we're now going to move into our discussion. And and I'm going to start off with some questions for our panelists, and then I'll invite our committee members to stick up their hands and ask questions as well. So we've been at this now for 3 days. This is the third day, and I think we have heard over and over in all of the panels the importance of paying attention to these societal issues. That success in citing these large technologies, and it doesn't have to be nuclear technologies, it doesn't have to be a nuclear waste disposal facility, it doesn't have to be a nuclear energy facility, it can be a wind farm or something else, that this will require in a democracy, will require the cooperation of the local community and maybe the state or canton or region as well. And so I want to dig into that a bit more and go into depth with a couple of things that you all mentioned. So I think probably for some technologists, if we want to use more of a social science term, to talk about the engineers and the scientists and the policy folks who are focused on doing this kind of work, it's probably terrifying to think about giving so much power to the local community or to even opponents, as Arna pointed out, that local environmental groups were given funding to do their work to oppose the facility in Sweden. And so I guess I want to dig into that more to understand how one overcomes that terror of giving the locals so much power. And so I guess my larger question is it possible to successfully cite a technology like this without giving up some power? And don't limit yourselves to Sweden and Belgium. I mean, I know you both know the larger landscape here, so let's speak in a more general way, or use examples from other places. So I don't know if one of you wants to jump in. And Arna, maybe you want to start, because one of your claims or one of your suggestions was to get scientists and engineers to discuss societal issues. In a way, to me, that's in some ways like asking the local community who knows nothing about a nuclear waste facility to discuss a nuclear waste facility. I mean, it's a similar level of ignorance in some ways.
Yeah, well, Anne has much experience of local population in municipalities that are thought of as good places for a repository. I also want to my presentation is a bit more on a so to say higher level, geographically, more on a national level. I think it's very important to see also informed critics. I mean, corrosion research at my university, they are super experts on copper. And also I would say that some of the anti-nuclear organizations have over the years become counter experts. Mm-hmm. And I think that fostering counter expertise is really important to have informed critics, and in particular in an early stage, so that they can so that the engineers developing something are actually become aware at an early stage that there may be serious problems here. for example, the corrosion researchers at my university, they found out that SKB looked at lots of factors that influenced corrosion, but they did actually not look very much at how radioactivity itself affects corrosion. So I mean, in a way, that's to me, I'm an amateur in this. I'm not a chemist, but that seems not very well done engineering. So inviting people that are actually critical at an early stage. And I think this is very important also with new reactors, with modular reactors. So to actually engage also with well-informed critics at an early stage and give them room and listen to them. I think that is important for developing a better technology. I think that, I mean, there is a risk that a group of engineers and scientists, they develop a concept and then they just keep developing it. Actually, here nuclear waste is a very good example. Already 45 years ago, the main design of what is now the proposed repository was already sketched. So with about 500-meter deep rock cavern, bentonite and copper capsules. And so the main things haven't changed, while some critics have argued that, well, nowadays it's actually possible to build much deeper rock caverns. It's not as expensive, and why not also look at some other materials than copper? So I think this is here nuclear waste is a good example of the dangers if you let a group of engineers just develop their own concept. So it's not only about acceptability of a technology, but also actually developing it in a better and smarter way.
Anne, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean I'm on the same line. I think it's some of the things have to do with, as you pointed out in the beginning of your question, Alison, in a democracy, if we're in a democratic structure, then we need to take into account the views of other people. If I sometimes encounter people who are struggling with siting facilities, or even if it's windmills or whatever, it would be great if it would also always go a bit quicker and no position was there, and then sometimes it's referred to more stringent leadership countries, but then it's in the assumption that you're absolutely right and that you did not overlook anything and that you did not miss anything, and that's why I put this emphasis on complexity and acknowledging complexity and almost embracing uncertainty to some extent, because we're all scared of that, and everybody's done their calculations, but any kind of mega infrastructure project, we all know that they all go over budget and they all take a lot longer, and it's always the optimistic view because people who are pushing for it believe in it, and I'm not even saying it's malign or they doing it for their own benefit. Even if they mean it well, they're overzealous and they're enthusiastic, and they may have missed a number here or there, or they may have not thought about something, like, for example, in our case, when they came up with it's so many trucks per day that will, or per week, that will pass through your street, and then people said, like, but this truck will not fit in my street, it won't work. And then we go back, and then yes, probably the engineers, once they were there with their truck or a bit earlier on, would also have seen that. But by doing this kind of exercise, by making this tangible, by using local knowledge in various ways, and that can be very technical knowledge as well. As I pointed out, not all local people are social scientists or non-educated people. Some people have more knowledge of certain things that are very technical than some of the people from the waste management agency, who are basically good and know everything about nuclear waste, but not necessarily about concrete, for example. So this makes it possible that people connect to that, and that is how you create ownership of that solution. And maybe, yes, they buy into it about 95%, but still they've made it their own in a certain way, and they can relate to it. And if yeah, what worked very well with these debates or these negotiations or this talking about the plans was trust. Arne referred to it. Trust, I saw, was very much put into those people from the waste management agency or experts that they sent there. Those that said, that's a good question, I don't know the answer, I'll come back to you later and we'll check it out. Those were far more trusted than those who came in like, I have here the answer, and no, you're wrong, I know better, because I mean, I've done the calculations and I can't be wrong. And we had both types, and you know, from they changed their ways. And one other thing, I think it's about the counter expertise, or also in our program in the beginning, that was a very important thing that local people appreciated, that they were actually given money or given a budget, and they didn't use it all, but some of it provided by ONDRAF to allow them to engage experts to scrutinize certain things if they felt that was needed. And in France also, when you talk to people from the CLIS, which is, it's not a local partnership, but it's some French version of it. Maybe it's also where local politicians and civil society actors and opponents come together to follow up what is going on around nuclear facilities in that area. And in Beur, it's not yet a nuclear facility, but they also have this status. They also have this CLIS. They appreciate very much that they can talk to. They can bring in counter expertise, and they can actually. I think they're working with ANDRA on a monitoring program where they also take part or take some responsibility in not necessarily doing measurements, but interpretation of measurements, and not just leaving that to ANDRA and their expert, but to have independent experts look into that, and the police has a say in who those can be and that sort of thing. So it's the verification and the demonstrating what you're doing and leaving options to negotiate or to check a bit what you're doing. And I think actually SKB at some point used it as kind of a motto, but Anna, you can tell me if I'm completely wrong. And I don't know how it was in Swedish, and it won't help the rest of the audience probably. But I think it was something like, don't trust us, test us, or check us, or something like that. And that was kind of a slogan that they used to those local communities that they wanted to engage with, in order to tell them, actually, we don't want blind trust. We want to be able to show you that we know what we're doing, or we mean well, and we want to show you our plans, and then you can turn them around and see if you agree and see that we're trustworthy. We want to prove that we're trustworthy, and I think that's an important one.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm not sure if I answered your question. But
yeah, no, you did. Absolutely, you did. And I think, my looking at these issues and waste siting issues in particular, a number of countries where they've had more success than others. And, you know, there's many countries actually in terms of nuclear waste siting they've iterated attempts to site nuclear waste. And, you know, I think Anna showed us that a bit with Sweden's situation, but some countries actually learn that what they need to do is support the opponents, provide funding to the local community to hire their own technical experts to confirm or not what they're being told by the implementer. Another element of success is allowing the local community or the whatever level of government that you're dealing with an opt-out, a point at which they can decide whether to keep going or not, instead of you know, having to decide or having it being decided for them that this is where the facility is going to be. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that based on what you've seen. You know, how do these communities or municipalities or whatever deal with conflict, and then how do they come to consensus, and what does consensus look like? Is consensus unanimity, which I doubt it is? You'll never get everybody to agree that this is the right thing or not. And so if you would both talk a little bit about that, I think that would help. So Arna, do you want to go first?
Yeah, well, okay. In Sweden, first SKB tried to find the best geological site. So they contacted lots of municipalities. In the beginning, they came with drilling teams without even informing them, and they met strong protest. Later on, they, to contact with the municipalities, they made investigations. They also made, benefit offers. If you do this, you will get jobs, you will get new roads, etc. And in a few places in northern Sweden, the process came fairly far, and they had local referendum. So in two places they had local referenda, and then the majority of the local population said no. So after this, SKB redefined the question and said that, well, most of Sweden is actually good enough from a geological point of view, and then they approached communities that already had nuclear power, and in those the population had much more trust in the nuclear industry. Many worked in the industry. So in a way you could say that the SKB did not succeed in any places that did not have nuclear power from the beginning, which is maybe says something about the local trust in a new technology. So, if you try to transfer that to new small modular reactors that are unknown, maybe the most probable place where people would accept it is places where you already have nuclear power, but they don't need those small modular reactors. So you want to place them in places far away where they have no experience at all. So from that point of view, it may become quite difficult to get acceptance for new kind of reactors in maybe in small local communities. And in this case, I suppose, building a nuclear waste site, somewhere you have to take care of the nuclear waste. So their community benefits is in a way of, if you take it, all the rest of the country gives you some benefits. But the issue is very different if you build a nuclear power or energy plant somewhere. Then it's the local benefit of the power and the heat that is at stake. So maybe in the first in the first reactors, maybe you could give some benefit package, but otherwise, I mean, if people don't want it, well, there's not much more to discuss. So, yeah, well, so in a way, from the nuclear waste experience, both it's the same story in Finland. There they also started with trying to find communities all over the country, and then they ended up with focusing on the local municipalities where they already have nuclear power. So yeah, it seems difficult to convince people in local communities of accepting a new technology that they see is dangerous.
So, just Arne, just let me probe a little bit more, and then I'll turn to you, Anne, and then I'll turn this over to our committee. But my understanding is that in the two local communities that were under consideration, there was a point at which they could agree to go forward or not, and they had to vote on this. And so I wondered if you could say something about that.
The ones that voted no, or
just how it worked. How it worked.
Well, well, it worked like that. SKB made, so to say, a local plan and showed how it would work in that community, and well, they presented the benefits they would get, well, new roads, etc., and the number of jobs that would arise, and then there was a local election, a referendum on this, and in both cases there was if I remember right, a fairly large majority against it.
Yeah. Anne, did you want to weigh in on the issues of consensus and how to make decisions? I can't hear you. You don't have your microphone. Yeah.
What will make a difference, hopefully. Just before I go into that, very quickly on what Arne said about not finding anywhere a place that has no nuclear. I don't know where they are at the moment in the Swiss program. I haven't been able to catch up with that, but they have several siting regions where they're going to move from different places into one, and there they do talk to different types of communities. Not sure, it may very well that they end up in the one that is already mostly involved with nuclear in the end, but still there is, it's not just nuclear communities that are participating there. In our case, it was particularly in the government decision, which was kind of prepared beforehand by other people, but by ONDREF suggesting to do it that way, but that was said that it could be anywhere in Belgium, but in any case the nuclear communities had to be investigated. A technical feasibility study had to be done there anyhow, and then that was what the government asked, but ONDREF then said, well, we will make a tight coupling between the technical and the social feasibility study. If either one of them fails, it's a no-go. So in those municipalities or communities that hosted nuclear power plants, who said, one said, we have other issues, it's the extension of the harbor and it's too much work and we won't go into another project. So there they did some basic monitoring or basic zero monitoring, and said to the government, well, that's maybe possible, but they don't want, so they're out. And then others also pulled out on social feasibility. But then, we did in those communities that were willing to talk at least, or where the local council said that they were not against discussing the issue. A colleague and I went out to do sort of an investigation to see whether there was willingness in the broader community to talk. And then we established how they would enter into the program. So these local partnerships was set up to do to actually kind of be the driver's seat of the technical and social feasibility study in that community. They were set up with the purpose of writing a report, reporting to their municipal council in saying yes or no, but not just yes or no, but no because, or yes under these and these conditions. And that's what four of them actually ended up doing. And out of these four, there were only 2 municipal councils that then basically took the report and said, well done, thank you, we're a candidate to host the facility. And then we ended up with a problem that ONDRAF and us as sort of helpers along the way had forgotten to think about what to do if we have more than one project, because nobody actually had thought that that could happen. So there were no criteria on which one to choose. That was a bit of the less positive note in that history, but I'll talk about that at some other point if you like. And then it was the government that on the basis of these reports decided where it could go. That decision was then, luckily those 2 communities are quite close to each other, so let's keep them both involved and make one project and integrate the conditions that they put forward. They were quite similar and feasible. And then we moved into this kind of project management structure that I showed in the slide, where they moved from the sketchbook to the license application phase. But it turned out that the sketch was quite drafty still, and that lots of things had to be figured out, and many components of the project needed to be redeveloped. So they came to some sort of master plan, which is, well, not the full detail, but at least there the local partnerships, the municipality, and ONDRAF again said, well, this is what we're going to go for. And then the license application was also discussed intensely with the local partnerships before it was submitted to the regulator. The regulator has it's been submitted first time around in 2013, so that's quite some time now. And every year the regulator keeps asking questions, which are then sent back, which are discussed again with the local people as well. But yeah, parts of the project are already under construction, and actually last week I was in Tableau, which is the information center that's been built, and a number of additional buildings are taking shape, and the local people are following that up. There's no opting out at the moment anymore. What was that I forgot, which was in the original idea when they could say yes or no, that ONDRAF had sort of made a gentleman's agreement to say that they could say no, and that would then be final for them. But I think in Sweden it's in the law that the municipality can say no. We don't have that, so technically the government can overrule, but ONDRAF said we won't do that. So that's there. But then one last remark, because I'm talking too much, is that because of the fact that this community already hosts interim storage, and is aware that if nobody else wants it, they'll be stuck with it anyway, and not in the best of possible long-term solutions. And I think that's also why it was feasible to do this project management in this consensus style, in a sense that, as I said, they haven't really voted, although they have some rules in a sense that every municipality, in terms of the conditions that they had set beforehand, can have the last say in whether they agree to the detail to which that has been put in the plan. But so they are they wait until consensus, but consensus sometimes also I don't really fully agree, but yeah, okay, I don't want to keep on going about this. And within the partnerships, they're advisory to the municipal council, so it's always the council in the end who will decide or needs to decide if anything. Yeah, there it's that's a bit the structure.
Excellent, thank you, thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn to our committee members for questions now, and we already have a bit of a lineup. So if others of you have questions, please stick your hand up and I will put you on the list. We're going to start with Dick Meserve.
Thank you. This has been a very interesting set of presentations. Very much appreciated. I have a question for Arne. He talked about how great benefit that came from developing informed critics and the interaction with informed critics. And I can say from my own experience at the NRC that having informed critics was exceptionally valuable in our discussions and decision making. The problem is you can't limit the conversation to informed critics. And I'm curious how Sweden was able to distill the stakeholder interaction down where it got to one particular serious issue which had to do with the copper as being a focus of attention. And I see this as a real problem, is that we have at the moment this vaccine debate that occurs in the United States, which has been hugely open. Everyone has had a chance to say their views. And we have this situation where a very substantial part of the public has heard all kinds of nonsense that comes in this conversation. Just the extent that they're using animal medicines that have never been proved effective. They're declining to wear masks because people claim they are not effective. So for the stuff from a medical point of view, from a technical point of view, is just completely crazy. And you know, you worry, and some of these areas that you open this all up, and you end up in the same place where you end up with this sort of crazy discussion that goes nowhere, and you end up with a complete logjam. So I'm kind of curious as to whether there's something that you have learned in Sweden as to how to have this public discussion end up being productive. And your insights in that would be helpful.
Yeah, well, first, talking about informed critics, I would want to point at one dilemma, and that is in a country like Sweden, which is, well, SKB, the research program that SKB has conducted, I mean, it has been going on for 40 years. It has cost. So this means that a large part of the geologists and corrosion experts and bentonite experts and, drilling deep hole experts get their financing from SKB. So in the research world, there are not so many independent researchers. I think this is quite a problem. And the corrosion experts at my university, they have been able to do their research without financing from SKB. So this is a bit of a, I suppose that there is a similar problem in the US, but so I think it's also important to have other ways of funding research that is relevant to, well, nuclear waste or new reactors that is independent of the ones that are developing it. That's one point about having informed critics. But then, I suppose that you also refer to the fact that, you have anti-nuclear people. I mean, you have really, so to say, counter-experts that are professors themselves and that are really knowledgeable. And then you have people that have very loud voices, but maybe don't know so much about the matter. Maybe that's what you are referring to. Here I thought that, I was at the, as I said, I think the environmental court, or the land and environmental court, that had to judge the application for SKB played a very important role here. And this was, well, their work is dictated by the environmental law that was passed in 1998. And I was very impressed there that for 5 weeks, lots of engaged stakeholders had gone around Sweden, and then at the final day they all presented their statements. They were all very polite. They all thanked the court for a good process. Well, I thought that some of the stakeholders, well, did not seem so very well informed. So there was a bit of a difference. But another observation was that some of the very well informed researchers, they were actually retired people. So they had nothing to lose in challenging SKB's application. So, to have a good dialogue with informed critics, you have to give them possibility to develop their arguments, so get funding, to get professional. And then you have to have a procedure, maybe a court or something else, where everyone has the right to speak and where an independent judge or moderator lets everyone speak. And I thought that it was, this environmental court, then, I mean, most of them are law and people of law, they are not engineers, but reading their decision after the court, it's almost 600 pages. It's quite readable actually, and they really, I mean, like lawyers do. I mean, also if you have a criminal case, you know, they weigh the arguments against each other, and then they identify the corrosion. This is really important. This they have to expand more. So I don't know. Maybe is this an answer to your question?
Well, you provided some insights about cultivating informed critics, and that's really not my question. The problem is how you deal with the uninformed critics who are not really intending to engage in the conversation so you can reach a consensus or reach a resolution, come into it to disrupt. How you deal with that.
Dick, maybe I can jump in on that one. And this is where, and maybe Anne wants to jump in too. I mean, I think this is where STS can help, because I think one has to ask the question is, why are there uninformed critics? What's going on in the society that produces that situation? I don't think it's not helpful to start with the assumption that, you know, they're just, if we're just talking about nuclear powers, and there are people who just oppose nuclear power. It's like they were born that way, opposing nuclear power. They weren't. Okay, it's not in their DNA. So one has to ask, why are we in this situation? What in society has created this sense of opposition? What is it a manifestation of? And we have to do some work, and it can be hard work to understand why the situation exists. Is it, you know, if there are lots of opponents of nuclear power, is it a manifestation of distrust of the people, you know, who have control over nuclear power? Is it a sense of lack of distrust or lack of control over their own situation? Is it something larger, on a larger political level? I mean, clearly, I think with the situation with vaccines, et cetera, and dewormer and whatnot, I mean, there's clearly a larger political context into which all of that fits, right? And it's really important to understand that larger political context. And so I think we have to do some hard work to understand some of those issues. And we do have to listen to what people's concerns are. And only then will we actually make progress. But to dismiss them out of hand won't get us anywhere. Anne, do you want to add anything?
I don't think I could have said it better than you did. So, but to add on to that maybe is that we had the luxury of starting with that program 20 years ago when society was slightly different. I think also in the US a lot has changed over a very short period of time, yeah, this polarization that seems to be trending everywhere is I agree with you, Richard. It's very difficult, but then what I think, Alison, you were also saying, it's by responding in the same way of setting yourself in the opposition of what of the others, and saying, by definition, you're negative, so you don't want to talk to me, so I don't want to talk to you. That does not help. I don't have the magic formula to resolve this, but it is about trying to understand what their issues are behind that, and that is not something that an implementer, in this case, for example, can just do, or you as a company who want to work somewhere. That's also why one of the reasons why I pointed to the fact that it's not just engaging with those locals, but it's about other institutional actors that are important to be able to tap into whatever issues there are. And the problem, obviously, that you have when you want to cite a particular type of facility, if you don't have any room for negotiation, that it could be another facility. If you come and bring energy, does it have to be nuclear, or can it be something else? Then that's a difficult starting point, maybe, or a more difficult starting point. But assuming the worst does not necessarily help from the start, I think, and it's often a kind of spiral reaction. In our case, and it's not the best case possible, and not everything is hunky-dory in Belgium, but we have a very nice lady who is extremely opposed to nuclear, who's been in the program for 20 years, fighting strongly. But on the other hand, she has a particular point, and it has to do with legacy waste and things that have been going wrong in the past, and pollution from years and years and years ago, and by the fact that this is acknowledged that the problem exists, and that ONDREF cannot solve it for her, but they can maybe in this program help her put the issue forward, she stays on board. And sometimes there's very difficult conversations, and she reiterates certain things over and over again. But in the end, yeah, she's part of the community, and because other people can relate to that, it's finding out what her problem is that can bring her in and stay in, even if she does not always agree. She lets certain things pass, and yeah, I know it's maybe too naive, but the only thing we can try is talk to people and communicate and dialogue and try again, I guess. And not everything will be a success, and yeah, can't promise that.
That's very helpful. I mean, my point was not that we dismiss any concerns; they should be addressed. I just wondered if there were some lessons from your experience in Europe as to how that you've learned about how to put this conversation and a trajectory that actually leads to productive consensus. That's all.
Well,
But I don't mean to dominate this.
It struck me that, well, if people are engaged, they can also learn quickly. There was a referendum in Sweden in 1980, and I was kind of a counter expert on the anti-nuclear side. And I was amazed. I mean, I traveled all around Sweden talking about nuclear power, district heating, all alternatives. And there was such an incredible interest in these issues. People learn so much. So when people are engaged in a thing, they become informed. So I mean, and very many in the anti-nuclear movement at that time were extremely knowledgeable about the whole Swedish energy situation, and often there were very there were also discussions between pro and anti-nuclear people. I mean, also with people from power companies, and often actually the anti-nuclear people were almost better informed. So if people get engaged, they also want to learn, and they become informed. So so engagement can also lead to a higher knowledge level on these specific issues. So I mean, I really experienced that as, I mean, it was, the interest and also the knowledge about among, I mean, now 40 years later, there is not, people don't know at all as much. So a conflict can really increase knowledge.
Just maybe very quickly, also the fact that facts, it's often then ends up in being hard opposition against certain facts or debating facts, and when acknowledging that there is it's maybe more about politics or interpretations and ideology than mere facts or interpretations, that can actually help by finding a way of recognizing that you or agreeing to disagree, that kind of thing, and but to remain in contact and not to fight over it. And one small anecdote is that in the program, the partnership program, in the early days, there was a fierce opponent, also a very nice man with very good points from time to time, but very hard line against many things. And one of the engineers who was also extremely on the other side, and they became actually quite good friends after they figured out that they both played the bagpipe, which is not something that many people do, and they went to concerts and things together afterwards, and they happily disagreed about lots of things, but they kept talking and moved on. So you don't have to become friends with all of these people, but sometimes you have more in common than you think beforehand, and these small things can actually help. But that was just an anecdote.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And Dick, I would also say that an element of what Arne and Anne have been saying, to keep talking, to engage, means you have to listen. So if listening and then and actually acknowledging the concerns and the fears, the hopes of who you're hearing, is an absolutely essential part. If you don't do that, if you just talk at, you will get nowhere. Let's turn over to Mike Corradini, who has been waiting so patiently.
Thank you very much, Alison. I wanted to thank the panel for their presentation. There was a mention by one of the panelists, and I can't remember which one, about Finland. So my first question is, what is the status in Finland now? My impression was that they progressed fairly far down the pathway. And then, assuming that my memory is correct, what are lessons learned from the Finnish experience that would be similar or different in terms of how they got their consensus-based citing and moved forward with a repository? Thank you.
Who wants to take a crack at that?
Arne, you're closer to Finland, so maybe you can start.
Yeah, well, what I can say is that in Finland there are now actually they have started construction 1 or 2 years ago, so they are digging down into the ground. It's situated in a place called Övrajoki that is close to 2 of the reactors. It's the same municipality. So Finland, like Sweden, first tried to go for the best possible geological place in the country, but then and most places, or almost all places, said no, we don't want it, and then they turned to the 2 places, the 2 municipalities where there are already nuclear power stations, and they accepted. The design of the Finnish repository is exactly the same as the Swedish one, so they have, so to say, adopted the Swedish. They have worked very closely with SKB, and well, in a way you could say that the process has been more swift in Finland, so there has been less opposition. They haven't had an environmental court that has had a hearing like in Sweden. Also in Parliament there was a fairly strong majority for building the thing, so there haven't been many obstacles on the way. What I wonder a bit about is, I mean, as the design is precisely the same, I know that some of my corrosion expert colleagues at the university are collaborating with Finnish colleagues, so I'm a bit wondering why there is not a discussion about the durability of copper canisters in Finland. But and I think that they plan to be more or less ready with the repository within 10 years, and start storing the spent fuel. So they are on track. I think that in Finland there is a very high trust, in particular in the regulatory commission there, STUK it's called, and fairly high also in the nuclear industry. So this goes both for the local municipality that hosts the repository, but also the country at large. I'm involved in, yeah.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I have a colleague, Marko Lehtonen, who is he studies the nuclear waste in Finland. We are writing a book together, which will appear later this year, called "Engaging the Atom," and there is a chapter on nuclear waste that also has a section on Finland.
So if I might just make sure I understand, so what you're saying is more the externalities of where the country is, I'll call it socially or politically, is different. It's not how they approach the public or this region, the municipalities, to get their approval or their consent. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's the Finns are a small and quite homogeneous country, and so it's and there's a high trust in institutions still. So politicians, experts, and I've been working with people from Reoki municipality a couple of years ago on this issue of monitoring and following up the facility, and they are they question. I mean, the Swedes are civilized debaters, but generally also then agree to disagree and move on. The Finns, for example, talked to people who were very much opposed to the facility, but they said, well, our institutions, the parliament has decided, and we went there and we argued for our case, but the parliament decided otherwise, and the parliament is the highest authority in our democratic society. We believe in the democratic society, so we don't like it, but that's what it is. So it's been easier there because they did not have to do so many invention of how we could talk to people who don't trust the politicians or don't trust implementers. So it's yeah, it's a different country with a different culture that is very much the issue here, I think. What is interesting there, and I don't know where they are with that at the moment, but the Areoki, the municipality of Areoki has agreed to the facility to host the waste of the nuclear power plant that is on their territory. But there's been, and then there's a new build. The Finns were amongst the only ones who were still building nuclear power stations. And there was a new one built there as well. So for them, that was kind of the whole package deal. But then there was a new nuclear reactor approved, and that was from another company, and that was somewhere else. And Oreoke said, okay, that's good, build it somewhere else, but not the waste is not going to come to us. So if that is going to continue, I do wonder what that will do in Finland in sometime from now, because part of the licensing or the approval for building the nuclear power plant did not say make sure that you take care of the waste. And as Arne pointed out, that's something that we seem to keep forgetting, that there's other issues to license afterwards. So it looks like everything is great and fantastic in Finland, but we'll see if that kind of progresses further into municipalities fighting over you keep your own waste, and what that will mean in terms of costs to society and waste producers to build a second repository of that type.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate
you can also, maybe you can also ask what is successful. I mean, maybe being able to actually start constructing a repository can be seen as very successful. But if the copper canisters actually will leak, if you invest very much in a plant that shows not to be such a good solution, then is that a good solution? So being the first to build a repository may not be the best result, so to say. So that remains to be seen.
Let me just make a shameless plug for an event next week on Finnish nuclear waste situation that's hosted by the National Academies. It's on September 9th. The Road to 2050 Project, High-Level Radioactive Waste Webinar Series, Finland's Successful Siting of a Nuclear Waste Repository, Lessons Learned, and the scholar that Arne mentioned, Markku Lehtonen, is one of the speakers at this, as well as some folks from the Swedish nuclear waste implementer, Pacifa Oy, and I'm hosting it. It's on the, just lost it now. It's on Thursday, September 9th at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you're interested, you can join us then for more discussion on Finland from Finnish experts themselves. So because we are at 10:26 my time, I'm going to end this a few minutes early because we have to close out in about 3 or 4 minutes. And just thank very much our panelists, Anne Bergmans and Arne Kaiser, for joining us for this really interesting discussion. I really appreciate your wisdom and your participation, and we look forward to using information that we gleaned from you today